Rep the 605 with Lacrosse 605 apparel from our clothing partner, Dakota Lettering. Just click on the store banner on the Lacrosse 605 website to see a wide variety of styles and colors. Want more options? Visit the store for an almost unlimited variety. Lacrosse 605 clothing. Represent.
And we're back after some technical difficulties. We are going to resume with a little more manual approach. Josh, in your first year at USD Lacrosse, how hard was it to find games against other teams when you were really just all by yourself on an island in South Dakota?
Yeah, we had a pretty good run at it. At that point in time, what is now MCLA, or the Men's Collegiate Lacrosse Association, that national governing body for club level lacrosse, it was called the USL-MDIA, and they had the USL-WDIA for women's lacrosse too. And we got lucky enough to get paired up with the Upper Midwest Lacrosse League, which was out of Minneapolis at that point in time. And we were a filler team. We were literally just a team in waiting. If a team canceled, we'd get a phone call, and we would try to get as many guys as we could. Sometimes we ran into tournaments with just 12, and that's a lot of fun, playing a full game with 12 guys. And we'd go play. Our first tournament we played in was in Winona, Minnesota, and it was a long drive. B, we just got annihilated. We were trying to play a zone defense with a slide package that we were not ready to run. Our midfielders were tuckered out really fast, and even us defenders that barely left the box on the defensive half of the field, that's that small defensive quadrant, we didn't go very far. So we realized how important conditioning was. We realized that we had a lot to work on, and the stairs in the Dakota Dome became our worst enemy and our best friend at the same time.
Right on. So when you mentioned conditioning was an issue or was important, what kind of practice? What did you guys do during practices to condition? You ran the stairs at the Dakota Dome, but what else did your practices look like for a self-coached college team?
Actually, this is kind of I don't think I've ever even told you this story. It's kind of neat. I dug on the internet. I just dug on the internet and started Googling lacrosse practice and information, and actually Flip Nuremberg of Rocket Pocket and former, he actually had online his journal. And it was like a diary, like a coach's journal and a diary of how to coach lacrosse and what you should do and practice planners and all this crazy stuff. And so I sent him an email, literally sent him an email just out of the blue. I'm like, hey, I'm a young guy trying to coach / president / run a club lacrosse team in South Dakota. We're brand new. And his response, we exchanged a few emails, but his response was, there's only one thing you can do that's going to really make your team better. Warm-ups, line drills, and then the key focus, scrimmage. He said scrimmage all day, all night, at least an hour of practice scrimmaging. And that's really what we did. We scrimmage as much as we could, and then we'd finish out with either mileage or stairs or sprints of some sort, trying to finish out strong. Practices were really, really ugly, playing tired at first, but then once you got used to it, it got a little bit better.
Yeah, even playing some adult league, playing a game is almost more tiring than just doing drills. Because drills you can kind of go a little half speed, but in games you either got to go full speed or all out. Now, Haley, you had some experience running the St. Cloud Club for a while, right?
Yep, that's correct.
What did your practices look like?
Now, what our practices look like, we were a self-coach program. This was a bit of a struggle for us because we had 12, 13 girls, barely enough to field a team. But when you have 2 or 3 girls that are underclassmen trying to coach girls that are older than you, sometimes it's a bit of a struggle. I don't know how this was for a men's program, but for women, it's a little tougher than that. Girls are a little more catty. You have to take emotions into consideration, but we made through it. Practices were about 2 hours. We practiced half field, men on one half, women on the other, because as a club sport at St. Cloud State, men's and women's, we weren't given a whole lot of seniority when it came to field time. So we'd split the field and we'd spend the last half hour of conditioning, running up and down the stairs of Husky Stadium. It came to be one of our best friends and worst enemies, like you had said. And we didn't scrimmage as much just because we didn't have as many girls, but we did. At the time, we we're trying to grow our program. So there was a lot of brand new girls, so we spent a lot of times learning the basics, doing basic drills, and just getting the footwork and stick work down.
So were you part of the group that founded the women's team at St. Cloud, or was there a women's team before you got there?
That was actually just before my time. It was started in 2008 by Mo Gaitan, and I had the opportunity to play under her. She coached when I started playing there in the spring of 2012, and she graduated and left the program shortly after, but I came in to do a pretty new startup program.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I just wanted to get to the main reason we have our special guest Josh Ring on the show is something we can talk about, which is we're all passionate about, which is sticks. So we'll have a break from and hear from our sponsors, and we'll be back to talk more about Stick Tech.
You've worked hard all year. I need you to bring it, dig down deep today, because today, everybody plays.
Everybody plays.
Everybody plays.
Everybody plays.
Play. When we first learned to work together, it was through play. We learned social skills, give and take, freedom and teamwork through play. There's no age limit on play, no skill level required. Play It Again Sports knows play. We buy and sell new and quality used sports and fitness equipment for less, so everybody can play.
Come on, let's play.
You bet I play.
Now it's time to play.
Play It Again Sports.
Play It Again Sports.
Play It Again Sports.
The official sponsor of
All those that play.
Welcome back to This Week in Lacrosse. Now we are going to talk about Stick Tech, and we have our special guest Josh Ring from Dakota Dyes on, along with Haley Pratt. We're going to talk about different kinds of sticks and more about really the piece of equipment that is an extension of the player. So, Josh, let's talk about mesh pockets first.
Yeah, your traditional lacrosse stick is going to come strung with mesh, or anything you find in the store 9 times out of 10 is going to be mesh. There's a couple different types of mesh you're going to run into. Like this is what you would normally see. It's a 10 diamond mesh. Just by feel, I'm guessing it's going to be a high tensile strength, like a String King.
Yeah.
Okay. You're going to have different types of mesh too, where there's going to be like I just said, like a high tensile strength. There's going to be meshes that have a wax coating on them. There's going to be meshes that are going to be what I learned how to play on, which is a hard mesh, and that's a bear because you have to break that mesh in, and that means breaking in just means you have to work the mesh until it gets soft. And then there's what you'd run into is just soft mesh, which is really good for beginners, but for advanced players it doesn't function. But you're going to have a 10 diamond mesh. It's going to be pretty standard that you're going to see. There's also going to be for primarily you hear about it more for D poles or long sticks or defenders they use with 6 diamond mesh, and that's gonna look a little bit more like this, where it's much wider. The mesh I have in here does have a mild wax coating on it, but it's a much wider diamond. Supposedly it's supposed to help with hold. It's supposed to create more hold when cradling. The pocket's supposed to swing easier. It's supposed to be a little bit softer after a break-in period. So those are what you're primarily going to see is 10 and 6 diamond. Back when I played, they actually had what they called monster mesh, which was a 5 diamond, and those things were just huge. They were really actually difficult to string. It took a long time to get a 5 diamond pocket done, but even within that you get variations from there. And I don't Corey, this is actually one of Corey's sticks. You get different sidewall patterns, and we can kind of talk through that in a little bit, but then different top strings too. I think everything we have here is going to be a 9 diamond top string for the most part. It's most commonly used, but you can see a 10 diamond top string, which is the number of diamonds, the mesh you run these strings through on the top. It creates a different hold, creates a different grip. So really when it comes to stick tech and what you're doing, there's a lot that goes into it. So
we might need 2 shows for that, actually. So let's talk about some traditional sticks that we have.
Traditional or trad, this is where the name comes from, and I guess the reason we short call it trad, traditional. Where it comes from is the original sticks were actually strung with some icky stuff. Icky, why not? Pig intestine, that was what the runners in between were. The leather was actually leather hide. So it was, yeah, a pretty gross process stringing a stick back when the Native Americans were playing. But with today and what we run into, a traditional pocket is one that has leather runners, always two, sometimes, most of the time four, sometimes just two with different sidewall patterns. And then you use what's called cross lace, and this stick is a good example. All this pink lace and this white lace is cross lace, and it's a variation of basically zig and zagging back and forth, creating a pattern to create your pocket. You can get really good hold. They play very smoothly. They have nice release as far as when you throw and release the ball. The toughest thing about traditional is maintenance. You definitely have to, when you string a mesh pocket, you can kind of string it once, get it dialed in, adjust your shooting strings, which we can talk about more too. That's the strings, the shoelaces across the top, and then you're good to go. But with traditional, after you strung it, after you play with it, these nylons and these runners, they shift. And you have to reshift and adjust and reshift and adjust. And eventually it's finally set and it'll stay, but it's a long process.
It is a long process. There's actually kind of a nomenclature out there that if you're going to use a traditional pocket, you should be an advanced player who knows how to adjust those sticks. I strung, one of my first traditional sticks was actually a thrown pocket, and I picked a thrown pocket because it has, every time the string meets a leather or another piece of string, it's knotted up. So really it essentially turns into a very low maintenance traditional pocket. Once I strung this, I could adjust the length of the leathers down here, but other than that, the only adjustments I had to make were the shooters, and the pocket really stayed the same. But this took me about 9 hours to do.
Yeah.
So there are some advantages and disadvantages, and if I did it wrong, I had to redo it, and that took a lot of time because of all the knots and twists and things like that. So there are tons of different ones. The one you had, I think, was called a pita pocket, right?
Yeah, this is going to be a pita. This was actually really made popular back when I started playing, so 98, 99. The Loyola team at that point in time, you'll hear it either called a pita or a dog track. Pretty much their entire team ran with this pocket. And what it is you bring these middle two leathers very tight and run a tight channel down the middle. And then as you can see, these outer two leathers are wider, creating a channel for that ball to sit in. For shooting and passing, the ball has a consistent release rolling right down that channel every time. And the entire team for Loyola that year, even defenders, and defenders using a traditional pocket is very rare, but even their defenders were using a pita or a dog track that year.
Right on. You mentioned Flip Nuremberg before. He has a company called Rocket Pocket, and they do a very similar kind of pocket to what the thrown pocket is. It's very much knotted up, but they use kind of a different kind of a zigzag track in the middle. And he's patented that pocket, which is, I think, one of the very few patented pockets, isn't it?
And I can tell you from experience, I've tried to do a rocket pocket more than once myself, and I've never done it. I've never had a successful attempt at one. Rocket pockets are very integral pockets. They have a lot that goes into them. Just kind of using this as an example, they have straight nylons, and depending on what type you get, they actually adjust the pocket placement. And what that is this would have, this stick right here would have what I'd call a mid-high pocket, or mid-high, which means on the head, looking at this wall here, where the ball would sit is in the middle. A high would be the ball would sit up higher, low, the ball would sit low in the throat. But rocket pockets and how they've stringed them, you can actually order them strong anywhere. The ball will sit in any position depending on how you order it. They're very low maintenance. There's not a ton of maintenance with them because of how they string them. And I did shell out the money. They're expensive. I shell out the money and bought one a couple years ago, and when I first was teaching my son how to play, he broke my head and I cried. Not literally, but inside a little bit. I was teary-eyed. But yeah, there's a lot of great options out there too for custom stringing. I am, out of my team of myself and Matt, I am the novice when it comes to traditional. Matt, Oscar, he's a pro. He's been doing trad every stick he's ever owned. He does traditional with. But there's a lot of great online shops where you can get a nice traditional pocket done too. The biggest thing is like you said already is make sure that you're ready to adjust your pocket, you're ready to put that maintenance in, and you're ready to kind of have some work to do to keep it up.
Right on. I've seen some of Oscar's pockets, and they're very cool. Oscar always tries to do something unique and special about every pocket he strings, and he strung one recently where the top string actually looked like the Six Flags, the Six Nations reservation. So that was really pretty cool. Speaking of traditional and girls sticks, Haley, you can't use mesh pockets. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is illegal in the women's game. We have to do, it's similar to a trad pocket, a traditional pocket. It's all strung with nylon, sidewall, leathers, center supports, top string. That's basically it. But yes, like I mentioned, the mesh is illegal. Even if you have it tightened up to where it is legal, you can see the ball above your side walls there. Still a big no-no. But one of the biggest things that people can use to customize the grip and the whip on the ball as it comes out of the stick is these center supports here. There's a couple different kinds. Right now I am running an STX brand. It has 2 rubber hexagons on each side going down the stick. My personal favorite here, well, there's also a De Beer Gripper Pro, an Under Armour center support that's made of leather, so also adds good grip. But there's a lot of variety in how you can customize your women's stick, just like a traditional men's pocket.
Right. Great. We're going to come back after we have a word from our sponsors and talk more about some pockets and heads and things like that.
Getting recruited by college coaches is more difficult every year. There are thousands of other athletes competing for your position. MyPlayerPage.com is the best place for athletes to showcase their personal and player information. Check us out today at MyPlayerPage.com. Any sport, any athlete, any state, any city, champions all.
Bargain Bites has a huge supply of refurbished electronics. They're a Microsoft authorized refurbisher. Just look at this. Computers as low as $100 and a wide variety of electronics, all so affordable. Look at these deals. A Dell 4-core laptop, fully tested, only $200. A MacBook, fully tested and ready to go, only $200. Subscribe to the Bargain Bites YouTube channel and get all sorts of great tips from super technician Brendan. Bargain Bites, just east of the airport off Benson Road. Visit them today online at bargainbites.net.
Welcome back to This Week in Lacrosse. My name is Corey Mitchell, here with
Josh Ring.
And Haley Pratt.
and we are talking stick tech this week on This Week in Lacrosse. Haley, let's talk more about girl sticks. There's a couple girl sticks here in front of us. Can you talk about some of the differences between just these two sticks? Let's start with the head.
Absolutely, and with the heads it's a little bit different than men's lacrosse. There isn't specifically, there isn't a big difference between a defensive, midfield, and attackman stick. It's more about level of play. There's a few differences that I can talk about here. This one is a really good beginner stick. This is a De Beer. And you know that it's a good beginner stick because there's not a whole lot of change in the angle here from the top of the head to the bottom. It's just easier to learn with. It's a good, heavy, sturdy stick. Definitely great for beginners. Now this is a stick I play with. This is an STX Crux. And what I like about it is, being a midfielder myself, has a nice, pretty severe angle at the top there. And that's really good for launching that ball long distances down the field, which you're going to be doing a lot in the defense and attack. Now in the attack, this difference in the stick is the head itself, not a big difference, but what you'll see is in the stringing. We have these thongs here in our shooting strings. They can only be wrapped a certain amount of times, but you'll see more wrapping around each of the little sections, and that adds more whip on the ball, which is going to accelerate your shot, add more spin on the ball. So that's probably the biggest difference you're going to see between an attackman and a defensive stick. And just like in the men's pocket, the ball, where it sits, that's all up to the player and the position. If you are shooting or you're in the midfield, you're going to be launching that ball hard and far distances. It's nice to have that ball sitting up here towards the top of your stick where that angle meets the bottom of the pocket. Now down here on defense, when you're going to be cradling, protecting that ball, it's more common that you'll see that pocket down there at the bottom of the stick.
Gotcha. I know I was thinking about this question earlier when you were talking about the women's pockets, and I don't know the answer. can men's sticks use that runner that you guys have? Have you ever seen that before?
I have not seen that. I have seen a few women's sticks where they have 4 leathers, and that's what I predominantly see in men's traditional sticks. I mean, you may have more experience with any center supports.
I've never used one myself, but I've seen it done, where they'll use that would primarily a women's center support and put it into a men's pocket. Like I said, I've never done it myself, but I have seen it used. I know that one thing that I've from what I've seen and heard is that like you've said, it adds a different level of grip to the pocket that you wouldn't get in a men's stick. So to be honest, legality, I don't know. However, I've seen it done, so I can't say either way.
Gotcha. It seems like it'd be a lot easier to string a traditional stick that way. And I've actually seen some of the places online stringing like a ladder channel that looks very similar, but just traditionally strung. So great.
Yeah, as you can see in the center support here, it just has built-in nylons that go straight across, which cuts a lot of the time off the stringing process itself and makes it a bit simpler.
So the center support, just to clarify, is just a one-piece strip. You put in the stick first and then you lace off of that, right?
That's correct. It ties up on the sidewall here and it connects down. There's 2 little holes here down by the ball stop, and that's where it connects. And on the side you have these loops here that you can tie in your strings throughout the stick.
Very cool. That would definitely make it easier. Yeah. How about some men's heads, Josh? What can you tell us about men's heads?
The biggest thing you run into when you look at different men's heads, and I'll just grab this one. This is a Nike Lakota U, not to name drop, but the only reason I am is because Lacrosse.com recently rated this the most popular stick in the game for last season. This is my personal stick, and it is used and abused, but what you see a lot is the offset is a big thing you want to look at. Like, for instance, offset is where the stick comes down and where it flattens back out. Having that head behind the shaft creates a lot of centrifugal force as far as for hanging onto the ball. It also helps with shooting when you crank and get that extra momentum snapping through. So that offset's something you definitely want to look at. For beginning players, very similar to how Haley said, that offset, a lot of beginner sticks won't have a heavy offset on them. They'll just have more of a lighter offset, so it's a more natural throwing motion, whereas you get into the higher end sticks, they're going to have a bigger offset. Sidewall patterns are all going to vary and differ, but the biggest thing you run into is looking at that offset and then the face shape. This has a very gradual, what they call flare. Flare is where the sidewalls come out into the top of that head. Really, flare kind of gets to be a personal choice too. Like a Nike CEO, another stick made by Nike has a very high flare. It pops out very wide, very early or very late in the throat, as far as for down in here where the ball would normally sit. So those are some things you see too. This is predominantly a midfield stick, although you do see a lot of attackmen using it. And what you really want to look for in that difference is attack sticks and midfield sticks. Usually you're going to have a bottom rail that's either going to sit high, where you can see where this starts to come back up. That's what I mean by bottom rail, this bottom piece. If it sits high, that's meant for a high pocket. If it sits low, it's for a low. Where that's at, it's very predominantly where they want the ball to sit. But midfield sticks are normally going to sit mid to high, and you're going to see a lot of flex in the head. As you can see, this is flexing pretty easily. That's creating a channel for that ball to roll out of past the channel that your pocket produces. Your pocket will produce a channel, then the head will produce a channel, which gives a lot more accuracy when shooting or passing. Midfield and attack heads are going to have a lot of flex, whereas in my D head here, this is obviously going to be much wider throughout, and it's not, I mean, you're not going to flex this. This is sturdy, it's very thick plastic, and you can just tell by looking at it that the pocket, I play with a mid-high pocket on a D-head, but traditionally you want like a mid-low, and you can see where that sidewall, where that rail sits, it's definitely set to have more of a mid-low pocket. Even if you get into kind of a cult classic being the torque, you can definitely see exactly where Gate Lacrosse wants that ball to sit. You can see the offset on the top, offset on the bottom rail, and this flat spot right here is exactly where they want you to string your pocket. So you definitely can kind of look at a head and tell where the pockets should sit, how it should sit, and kind of figure out where you want it strung at and where you want it to be. So
gotcha. So when you talk about the head flex, are there different advantages to having different types of flex for a head?
Yeah, attack and midfield shooters want head flex, and once again, this Gate torque has a ton, as you can see. That's going to, when you throw, when you shoot and you crank, that ball is going to, the head's going to flex with the momentum, and that ball is going to have a much narrower channel to come out. Usually, someone that's a defender that primarily stays on the or midfielder, I'm sorry, that primarily stays on the defensive half of the field, they're going to want something that flexes lightly. Like if I really push, this flexes hard or just a little. And for defenders, you want very little flex at all. You want your stick to be solid, so when you're throwing those poke checks or you're throwing those slap checks, your head's not bending and breaking underneath the pressure that comes from that. So.
Gotcha. You know, there's all the other specialty sticks. This is a Tribe 7 Go 7 head for face-offs. It's kind of a specialist stick, and kind of the benefit of this stick is its flexibility. It's made to flex a whole bunch to kind of wrap around the ball on the men's face-off, and just really kind of grip the ball out of the gate so that they can pick it up, pinch and pop, and go along. There are some disadvantages to having a head that's flexible. Ground balls being one of them, because it doesn't want to dig through the grass. It wants to bend off, and it's tough to pick up ground balls unless you really have good technique. Haley, what other specifications, are there any specialties about women's sticks, or you can talk about for specialties or face-offs, anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that is crucial on the face-off, and there is a rule about this, it was added I believe 2 or 3 years ago, is that your sidewall cannot be strung to face the inside. That gives you a bit of an advantage on the face-off, because the ball will be able to sit further in your stick. So the sidewall has to be out behind the stick or even on the outside. As far as shooting strings, we can only have 2 shooting strings. And they cannot be an upside down V, they have to be 2 straight across now. So this stick is actually illegal and a bit out of date now. So, and like we talked about, our pocket is not as deep. Like I said, the ball has to be with pressure from the ref at eye level, has to be seen above the sidewall. So those are the only really strict regulations as far as stringing in the women's game.
Okay, do you look at different head flexes for different positions or anything like that?
No, head flex is not, it's honestly kind of a new concept to me. It's not a big part of the women's game, since our sticks are not really being used for the poke check, because this cannot make contact with any player's body or through the sphere. So head flex is, yeah, it's not, there's not a lot of variation,
Gotcha.
I should say.
So now you mentioned shooting strings. What's the purpose of shooting strings? What are shooting strings for our audience?
Sure, they basically alter the spin or the speed as it comes out of your stick. So as the ball is leaving, it rolls all the way up. For beginners, you may think that the ball may just come out, straight out as you shoot that, but it really rolls off the top. So if you have more winds or more thongs in your shooting strings, it's going to have more spin. It's going to really whip into that goal. You'll have more accuracy that way. And 2, if you go without shooting strings, and there's ways you can string them without them, don't get me wrong, but having them allows the ball to come straight out the middle of the stick, leading it so you can guide it, put it where you want it in the goal.
Gotcha. Can you use, now with men's sticks, they can use shooting cords or laces. Can you use laces, or is it just cords?
That's a good question. It is just the nylon. We cannot use shoelaces. It would actually slow down our ball.
Gotcha. Josh, can you talk about some of the men's sticks with shooting strings?
A big thing that's actually happening this year for U.S. lacrosse in general is actually the U-string is now illegal. It is no longer usable. And what a U-string is, and sadly, I'm sorry, I don't have an example. What a U-string is, previously players would string a shoelace or a pocket nylon, and they would drop it way down deep in the head, and they'd make an inverted U or a U that kind of ran and created a channel for the ball to run out of. This was the last year of legality for that U string. It's going to be taken out and not legal any longer. And now we're following what we have to follow, very similar to what Haley mentioned earlier, is the 4-inch rule. Anything that's a nylon or a shooter needs to be within 4 inches of the top of the head. So how a ref, if they did a stick check, would measure that would be from the top of the scoop down. 4 inches, I'm guessing, to be about right here. Everything that's a shooting string needs to be up and above that line, anywhere within that plane. So it kind of runs across the top of the head. So that's why everything you see nowadays no longer has that U-string or is going to have this string straight across. Nylons, which are these top strings here, are going to add a little bit more whip and snap. When you ball releases, it's going to catch up underneath there and whip and snap out. And these shooting laces, or these shoelaces, is really boot laces, whatever you want to call them, kind of are used more to guide the ball to that point. You can get a lot of different things going too. As Haley was mentioning, when you shoot, the longer the ball stays in the stick, the more carry it's going to get. And as you can see, I'm having a hard time forcing this pocket to ride up what we call the ramp. The ramp is this part right here, where how the mesh runs to the head. I would have a hard time forcing the ball to run up the ramp. So this would really not be a bad shooting stick, but it's not going to have the same velocity as a pocket that has a heavy ramp in it. Whereas I think if I use Corey's stick here as an example, you can see where that sticks up and that ramp sits right there. That's going to hang on the ball a lot longer through your shooting motion. It's going to create more drag and whip, which is where that ball sticks, and it's going to come out. If you were to throw with a lot of, when players say their stick has too much whip, it's getting stuck on these strings and it's going straight into the ground. But players that are used to playing with that, and advanced players get used to playing with that, it's actually advantageous to have it. So as players advance, you'll notice most players, when they start, kind of have a stick like this where it's, a nice gradual ramp that's easy to throw, easy to maneuver, and as they advance, they're going to get more of that top whip or more of that pocket placement up there.
Right, I've had some conversations and I've even tried it out a little bit, adjusting the shooting strings to be different lengths and different heights to increase your shot speed or your accuracy for passing and shooting, and there's really a lot of, it's almost an art more than a science.
Yeah, and it's really player preference. I myself, and kind of going into something a little different here too, I use what's called an Iroquois drop top. Basically what that does is this is my top string up here. Normally the mesh hugs right into these top holes. I drop my mesh down, so essentially my pocket starts lower in the throat, but also I get a couple advantages. I have the advantage of having the feel of a low pocket, but the release of a high pocket. But what I run into is, and as you talked about, is I run into a pretty heavy high-end release, and I actually, when I strung this, I love how it plays, but I had to change my shot completely. I was a pure overhand shooter, and when you have a high bag like that has drag and whip with it, it's very difficult to overhand shoot. So I had to change to a 3/4 sidearm. Young players do not shoot 3/4 sidearm. Master overhand first. But it was definitely a change and a shift, and even tightening your shooters makes a big difference. Rule of thumb is your top shooter should always be the tightest. It should always be the one the ball snaps off of. The middle should be obviously middle tension. That bottom one's more of a guide. Men's pockets, you can see anything from 3 to 4. 4 being the maximum for number of shooting strings you can have, but they have to be within that 4-inch line.
Great. We were talking about during a break how a stick that's not strung properly can make life miserable for a new player. What are some suggestions you guys would have for making sure that a new player gets the stick strung properly?
Sure, well what I would say first is I always suggest getting your stick professionally strung. Don't try to do too much right away if you're not totally experienced with it, but by all means, get out and learn, take apart a stick, learn the ropes, but get it professionally strung, and don't try to mix it up too much. I want you to play with that stick, and this is just for the women's, what I teach them. This could be totally different for every coach, every team, every form of the game, but I tell them once you have it strung, I want you to play with it. You may hate it at first, it may be tight, but you need to play with it and break it in, and then you can really determine what the issue is.
I had a conversation with some of my U11s teams that they keep changing their sticks around almost daily, and you can see that they're not consistent with their play. So I said, string your sticks, figure it out, and then leave it. And speaking of stringing sticks professionally, Josh?
Well, I had a caveat to what Haley just said too. A big thing that I think really needs to be stressed is it's the wizard, not the wand. You don't need to have the most high-end stick on the market to be a great lacrosse player. It's really, if you were to get like an STX Aviator beginner stick and drop a good pocket in, you're going to be good to go as long as it's got a solid pocket. And that's kind of where I guess Dakota Dyes comes into play. Myself and Matt were really looking for a way to kind of stay connected to the lacrosse community. I helped Corey actually back when it was the Athlete Development Center, so 2 years ago, get started, but work schedule and timing just doesn't give it to me. So I really kind of just dove into stringing, and what we try to do with Dakota Dyes is we're trying to get decent heads with decent pockets at affordable prices. We're really not trying to make a ton of money with what we're doing. We're really trying to give back to the game. I don't think there's been an event that either Matt or I have gone to as Dakota Dyes and not ended up donating something. I know he gave a shaft away at the wheelchair lacrosse tournament. I know when we played that alumni game, I think between Matt and I, we both gave away like 5 sticks. But it's definitely more about growing the game, and we do custom stringing, any from standard mesh to, if you want, more detailed traditional pocket. There's a couple easy ways to find us with what we do and who we are. Facebook's an easy one. It's just facebook.com/DakotaDies. We're on Instagram and Twitter too. Or you can email us at dakotadieslax.com or dakotadieslax@gmail.com. We don't really have price points. I think it's more like what do we have on hand and what can we sell and what can we string. A lot of the stuff, to be honest, that we do is it's going to be entry level or mid-level sticks that we're trying to get in the hands of players, and we're always willing to kind of have some sticks out there going. I know Matt was at the Rumble in the Hills and he sold his stick to a player, and the player scored 3 goals in that game and was like, "Your stick's amazing," and we're like, "No, you are. It's the wizard, not the wand." So definitely trying to help grow the game however we can.
Well, I will definitely vouch. I've seen a lot of custom sticks that are strung very poorly. Dakota Dies does a great job. Both Matt and Josh do a wonderful job stringing traditional sticks and mesh sticks. Haley has a lot of experience stringing sticks. Ask your coach. Ask for help. There's YouTube tutorials. Make sure that your stick works for you, so make sure that you enjoy the experience of playing lacrosse better. That's all we have this week. For my co-host,
Haley Pratt,
and special guest,
Josh Ring.
I'm Corey Mitchell, and you are Lacrosse 605.